Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. The baseball season is almost a month old, and my Baltimore Orioles haven't started off as well as I had hoped. The starting pitching has really struggled so far. Thankfully, the season's only about 20 games old. There's plenty of time to turn it around and start playing the way most of the fans expected going into this season. But enough of my frustrations with the O's, listener. You want to hear about today's book. Han and Chewie try taking a straight transport job. But when they arrive for the pickup, the cargo turns out to be the one thing the two hate more than anything else. Slaves. They fight their way out of the job, but the ordeal leaves Han 10,000 credits short, and he vows to make the leader of the slavery ring pay. It's Han Solo's Revenge, the second story in the Han Solo Adventures by Brian Daley. And I'll talk about the book coming up in just a few moments. But first, it's listener question time. I have two emails today. The first comes from longtime listener Robin. Robin says, I watch a lot of YouTubers watch classic Star Wars for the first time. Most of them are mostly unspoiled by pop culture, and I love how shocked many of them are when the Empire destroys Alderaan. What did they expect? The Jedi Order coming to save the day? No. They are all but extinct. There is nobody there to save a planet after Order 66. It's kind of refreshing. You can kill the Emperor, Darth Vader, and Tarkin, but you can never bring back Alderaan. How did you react to the destruction of Leia's home planet? Thank you very much for the question, Robin. Honestly, I can't remember how I reacted the first time I saw Alderaan destroyed. I was so young the first time I watched Star Wars, more than 40 years ago. By the time I was old enough to really understand what had happened, I had seen the movie so many times, I was probably just numb to it. So the destruction of Alderaan has never been shocking to me. However, as I've gotten older, I've come to hate Tarkin and the Empire for what they did. And the Empire has done many terrible things, too many to count. But with all the awful things the Empire did, destroying Alderaan is the most reprehensible to me. To annihilate millions of people, most of them innocent of doing anything to resist Imperial rule, just to make an example to others, to strike fear in other systems, it's the worst thing we see the Empire do, in my opinion. Thanks again for the question, Robin. Today's second email comes from another longtime listener, Sable, who says, Hello again, Aaron. I have two questions for you. Number one, if Han saw Anakin as a ghost and Anakin asked him for forgiveness, would Han forgive him? Number two, what would have happened if Bria Theron had survived and met Han's family? Well, thank you for the email, Sable. I'll answer your second question first. I think if Bria Theron had lived to meet Han Solo's family, I believe they would have had a pleasant encounter in both Legends and in canon, depending, of course, on how old Han's children were at the time. If Bria met Han's family while the kids were still young, I think she and Leia would have hit it off, trading stories about dating Han. I think Bria would be proud that Han joined the rebellion and fought the Empire. And I think Han and Leia would have expressed their gratitude for everything Bria did as part of the rebel military. Now, if Bria and Han had reunited after the Solo children were adults in both Legends and canon, I think their conversations probably would have been more awkward and, at best, bittersweet. As to your first question, Sable, I doubt Han would forgive Anakin for the things he did to Han, Leia, and Han's friends. But I guess that depends on each person's point of view. What does forgiveness look like to you? What does it look like to Han? In this case, I think Han and I would have similar reactions to Anakin asking for forgiveness. In terms of Han's torture at Cloud City and freezing him in carbonite, I think Han would tell Anakin to get lost, using much more colorful language than I just did, and to leave him alone. But when it comes to the things that Anakin did to Leia, like torturing her, standing by while her home and family were destroyed, and trying to kill her numerous times throughout the war, not only do I think Han would not accept an apology and Anakin's request for forgiveness, I think Han would try to attack Anakin, maybe even try to swing on him. I'm not saying I would condone that response, but I would understand it. Once again, thank you for the questions, Sable. Now, listener, if you have a question for the show, send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, just record a short message and email it in. But please record it in MP3 audio format. Now it's time for today's book, Han Solo's Revenge by Brian Daley. Grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. The story begins with Han Solo and Chewbacca in a rut, following several failed smuggling jobs in the corporate sector. But they luck into a legitimate job showing holodramas in the Badlands of the planet Kamar. For 11 days, Han shows the Badlanders a travel documentary called Varn, the World of Water. The Badlanders pay Han in gems and trinkets to come and watch the holo every night. But Han doesn't want to keep showing the Badlanders the same thing over and over again. He wants to spice things up. One of Han's smuggling buddies, a man named Soniad, delivers him the holodrama Love is Waiting. Han turns it on and waits for the Badlanders to offer him more payment. But the reaction he gets is anything but positive. The aliens start yelling and throwing rocks at the screen. They destroy the holoprojector, and the scene quickly turns into a full-blown riot. Han doesn't understand what's happening. The Badlanders have never acted hostile to him before. "You idiot," Soniad says. "You've been showing a holo about a water planet to people that live in the desert. You've started a religion." Han calls Chewie to fire up the Falcon's engines while he and Soniad sprint back to the landing platform. After they escape, Han wonders about where he and Chewie are going to find work now. Soniad tells them that he's heard someone is offering to pay 10,000 credits to transport cargo past corporate sector authorities. Han thanks his friend for the tip, and he and Chewie head out to take the job. The smugglers land on the planet Lur and meet their contact, a man named Zlarb. Han gets a bad feeling about the guy, and it turns out Han's gut is right. Zlarb and his associates pull their blasters and force Han and Chewie back onto the Falcon. Then Zlarb calls up the cargo, a group of Lurian slaves. Zlarb forces Han and Chewie to the cockpit at blaster point and forces them to set course to the planet Bonadan. But before they lift off, Han's droid companions, Bollux and Blue Max, set off the Falcon's fire suppression system, dousing the interior of the ship in foam. Han and Chewie take advantage of the distraction, attacking and killing Zlarb and his companions. They free the Lurian slaves and then set off to Bonadin. Han is angry. Someone owes him 10,000 credits. Han and Chewie enter the spaceport lounge on Bonadin, where Zlarb was supposed to meet his employer. They scope out the place for hours, but nobody arrives. Instead, the two are made by a corporate sector auditor. Fiola accuses Han and Chewie of being part of an underground slave trade that she's investigating. Han's insulted. He tells Fiola about Zlarb and the Lurians, and he intends to wring his payment out of Zlarb's boss. Outside the lounge, Fiola spots a swoop gang that she says may be part of the slave ring. Han tells Chewie to head back to guard the Falcon, while he and Fiola follow the swoop gang. Chewbacca returns to the spaceport and finds someone trying to break into the Falcon. Chewie sneaks up behind him, lifts him up, and stops him from opening the ramp. The furry little alien says he's a skip tracer, and he's been authorized to repossess the Falcon unless Han and Chewie can pay off their creditors. Meanwhile, Han and Fiola track the swoop gang, but they're soon discovered. They jump one of the gang members and steal his swoop bike, with 3 members of the gang in hot pursuit. Han steers the swoop into a gorge, trying to lose the gang. But with 2 adults weighing down his bike, it's clear the gang will soon catch them. Han exits the gorge and spots an enormous weather control station nearby. He lures their pursuers in close, and just before they catch them, Han steers through the girders of the station's support structure. Han flies through the girders, dodging left and right. The swoop gang members are good, but they're no match for Han Solo. Just before the pursuing swoops reach Han and Fiola, Han shoots through a small opening in the girders. The swoops try to follow, but they can't make it through and explode against the sides of the weather station. When Han and Fiola return to the spaceport, they find the rest of the swoop gang surveilling the Millennium Falcon. Han realizes that he and Fiola can't possibly fight their way through the entire gang. He'll have to meet up with Chewie somewhere else. Fiola says she knows the slavery ring is connected to one of the governing clans on the nearby planet Amud. Han sends Chewie a message telling his friend that he and Fiola will hop on public transport to Amud while the Wookiee and the droids take the Falcon and meet them there. Chewie acknowledges the plan and takes off, with one hitch. Spray, the skip tracer, says he's not leaving the ship until Han and Chewie either pay off what they owe or they sign the ship over to him. The Falcon arrives in orbit around Amud. Boom! An explosion rocks the freighter. A bomb. It must have been planted by the slavers back on Bonadin. Chewie and Spray realize they're not going to make it down to the planet's spaceport. They angle the ship to a flat area in the mountains above the capital city. Spray tells Bollocks to find Han and then shoves the droid into one of the Falcon's escape pods. He launches it. Chewie manages a controlled crash in the mountains. Then, he starts repairing the damage, waiting for Han to arrive. Han and Fiola book passage on a luxury liner, the Lady of Mindor. During the trip, Fiola tells Han about her investigation into the slavers. She says that her assistant, Mag, discovered the payments to Zlarb and the connection to Amud. Fiola says she suspects someone in the corporate sector authority is involved in the ring. The Lady of Mindor arrives in the Amud system when suddenly the alarms blare. Pirate attack! Han and Fiola run for the liner's lifeboats. convinced the pirates are actually looking for them. The two sneak past the main boarding party, launch one of the lifeboats, and head down to the surface of the planet. Han and Fiola land at the spaceport on Amud and are flabbergasted to find Bollux and Blue Max waiting for them. The droids tell Han what happened to the Falcon, and immediately they all take the lifeboat up into the mountains to find the ship. Of course they do, and after finishing repairs, the group returns to the capital spaceport. Fiola gets herself and Han a meeting with the ruling Glade clan. Unfortunately, the head of the clan, the Moor Glade, is about to fight an honor duel against a dangerous gunman. Han volunteers to take the clan leader's spot, confident in his ability to outdraw just about anyone. But that confidence quickly disappears when Han sees who the challenger is. Galandro, a renowned gunslinger known as the fastest draw in the galaxy. Galandro turns to face Han and then pauses. He apologizes to the Moor Glade, releasing Han from the honor duel. The turn of events stuns everyone, but quickly Fiola regains her composure and starts asking the Moor Glade if he has any information on the slavery ring. He does, and it turns out the person running the slavery ring is none other than Mag, Fiola's assistant. The story ends with the corporate sector authority rounding up the slavers and arresting Mag. They also have a warrant for Han and Chewie, but the smugglers escape with Fiola's help. They grab Spray, who is actually the authority's territorial administrator in disguise. Han demands the authority pay the 10,000 credits that he and Chewie are owed. When he receives it, the smugglers release Spray and jump to hyperspace. Time to take a break. When we return, I'll talk more about Han Solo's revenge. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me take a moment and recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Thrawn Alliances is the story of how the Grand Admiral first met Darth Vader. The two team up to stop an Imperial threat on the backwater planet Batuu. The mission causes Thrawn to remember a trip he made to Batuu for the Chiss Expeditionary Forces, and Lord Vader reminds him an awful lot like a young Republic general he met there years before. Check out Thrawn Alliances by Timothy Zahn. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. And today, I'm talking about Han Solo's Revenge by Brian Daley, the second story in the classic Han Solo adventures. I know for many Star Wars fans that are a little bit older than myself, those in their mid-50s into their early 60s, the Han Solo adventures are some of their favorite stories in Legends. Specifically the first book in the collection, Han Solo at Star's End, the book that I covered in the episode previous to this one. I really like Han Solo at Star's End. It's a fast adventure story. I actually like Han Solo's Revenge a little more. I think the opening scene of the book, with Han showing the holodramas to the Camarans, is one of the funniest things in Star Wars to me. You listeners know, I have a pretty narrow sense of humor. I don't laugh at a lot. I don't laugh at a lot of Star Wars. But I find Han accidentally establishing a religion amongst the Badlanders of Kamar, people that live on this desolate, arid planet, by showing a travel documentary about a water world and then seeing it backfire in classic Han Solo, almost vaudevillian, slapstick fashion. It really tickles my funny bone. I actually laughed while reading that opening chapter of the book. So for me, we've already started off well in Han Solo's Revenge. I also really like the dynamic between Han and Fiola. Fiola is a human from the planet Lord. She's smart. She's ambitious. And like many Lordians, she has a superpower. The Lordians are a people that were enslaved centuries ago, and their cruel masters forbade them from speaking. If they spoke, they were killed. As a result, the Lordians developed a system of communication that relied on subtle facial expressions and body movements and little gestures. So the people who grew up in this society are able to easily interpret the non-verbal communication of several different species. When Han and Chewie go to scope out the lounge on Bonadin, where Zlarb was supposed to meet his employer and get paid, they think they're being pretty slick. They're sitting at a table away from the table that Zlarb and his employer are supposed to meet at. It's kind of a fancy lounge. There are floral bouquets and little half lattice walls. It kind of reminds you of something out of the 40s or the 50s that you see in movies depicting the upper class. Han and Chewie are convinced that to everyone in the lounge, they're just two spacers there enjoying a drink and enjoying the music. But Fiola makes them pretty quickly. She's able to tell that our two heroes are scoping out the place, specifically this one table. When she confronts them later, she accuses Han and Chewie of being part of the slave trade. She mistakenly thinks Han is Zlarb, the slaver that she's investigating, because she notices that anytime someone passes the table that Zlarb and his employer were supposed to meet at, Han and Chewie very subtly glance over and watch what's happening. Being a Lordian, being very attuned to nonverbal communication, particularly the nonverbal communication of humans, Fiola can tell that something is up. It's another scene that I think is really well written. And right off the bat, the reader can tell that Fiola knows her stuff. Soon after, you have 3 or 4 edge of your seat, very fast, edge of your seat adventure scenes. Han and Fiola speeding through a gorge. A few members of the Swoop Bike clan in pursuit. Daly writes the scene as though you're on the Swoop Bike with Han and Fiola. A lot of it reminds me of the visuals of the pod race from episode 1, The Phantom Menace. At least that's the way I picture it. Han juking left and right through the canyon. The Swoop Bike's hot on his tail. Later, you have Chewie and Spray and Bollocks as the Falcon drops out of hyperspace and settles into orbit above Amud when the bomb goes off and damages the Falcon's ability to drop below a certain altitude. Chewie and Spray realize they can't settle at the spaceport until they fix the damage that the bomb has done to the Falcon if they drop too low. So they basically crash in the mountains. It's a controlled crash, but it's basically a crash. And the reader can feel the way Chewie is wrestling with the controls of the Falcon. Later, a scene that I didn't get into in the plot summary, there's a stampede of what I imagine are sort of like a cross between mountain goats and bison that Chewie almost gets trampled in. He shows his wits and ingenuity by rigging up a hang glider and gliding down the side of the mountain away from the stampede. Another harrowing scene. You can feel the fear and the anxiousness that Chewbacca is feeling. He's a large, strong Wookiee who we know can basically hold his own in any physical situation, but it's a stampede of hundreds of animals. He could easily be trampled and killed. So instead of using his muscles, he uses his mind and escapes the situation. Han does something similar when the luxury liner arrives at Amud and is attacked by pirates. When the pirates board, the captain of the liner tells everyone to return to their quarters. He assumes the pirates are there simply to loot the luxury liner's casino and possibly steal some of the riches that the passengers have. Han figures out that the pirates are there to find Fiola, and by extension, to find Han himself. They sneak past the pirates. They make their way to the luxury liner's lifeboats. It's a tense scene. There's a lot of suspense. There's not a ton of action. They do have to jump one pirate who is guarding the entrance to the lifeboats, but they don't have to fight through dozens. But they surprise the one pirate left guarding the lifeboats. They defeat him pretty easily. They jump in one of the lifeboats and launch, heading down to Amud. finally, after Han and Fiola and Chewie and Spray are all reunited, they go and meet one of the ruling clans of the planet who Fiola believes has information about who in the corporate sector authority may be running the slavery ring. When they hear about the honor duel that the Morglade has accepted, Fiola suggests to Han to volunteer to take the Morglade's spot. In her opinion, Han has a much better chance of winning the duel than this very young aristocrat who appears to have never handled a blaster before in his life. Of course, Han does, and then we meet the man that he is supposed to duel, a man described as the greatest gunslinger in the galaxy, Galandro. Here, the reader is fully expecting an old-school Wild West showdown. This is high noon. This is pistols at 10 paces. This is every John Wayne Western that you have ever seen. This is The Quick and the Dead for more modern Western fans. But the author, Brian Daley, throws us a curveball. When Galandro sees that Han is going to go through with the duel, he simply turns to the Morglade, bows, apologizes to Han, and then turns and walks away. As someone who was fully expecting to see this Western-style duel, and of course, expecting Han Solo to win. We know Han has to win if there is a duel. It's one of those unexpected plot points where after it happens, you think, okay, something else must be going on. At least, that's what I believe most readers would think. It turns out it is. Galandro is secretly working with Spray. Spray being the corporate sector territorial administrator who is working undercover to try to expose this slavery ring. But he's doing it unbeknownst to Fiola. It turns out they have parallel investigations going on. And Spray is using Galandro to try and get information from the Morglade. Eventually, the Morglade hands over the information to Fiola and Spray about who in the corporate sector authority is working with the slavers. And it turns out it's Fiola's assistant, Mag, a character we meet very, very briefly at about the midway point of the story. I'm usually pretty good at figuring out mystery stories. I'm usually pretty good at figuring out who done it before it's revealed in the book or the TV show or the movie. But I remember the first time I read Han Solo's Revenge. I did not figure this one out. But credit to Brian Daley for hiding that from me and from other readers. Now, this is not the last we're going to see of Galandro. He's going to make an appearance again in the final story in the Han Solo Adventures, coming up in our next episode. But for now, it's time to go. Listener, if you have something that you'd like to share with me, a question, an opinion, or a comment about anything I've said on the show, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And don't forget to send in your favorite Star Wars character groupings. I love reading the messages that you send in. Coming up on the next episode, we finish the Han Solo adventures with the third and final book, Han Solo and the Lost Legacy by Brian Daley. You can look forward to that episode coming out on May 2nd. And special shout out to all those Star Wars fans that are heading over to Tokyo for this year's Star Wars celebration. It begins today, Friday, April 18th, and runs through this Sunday. I can't wait to hear about some of the things that Star Wars has coming out in the next couple of months and years. Personally, I am most looking forward to any new information about upcoming animated projects, or I'm hoping for another publishing initiative similar to the High Republic publishing initiative that has been going on over the last few years. At any rate, if anyone is heading over to Tokyo, I hope you have a great time. And for those of you who aren't headed over to Tokyo, you can join me on the couch. We'll have our own CouchCon, enjoying Star Wars Celebration on the Star Wars page on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in Legends.